So let's dive right in. Today's quote: "You never know when a moment and a few sincere words can have an impact on a life." Zig Ziglar. Right? So I want to pick up today, and I gave everyone kind of a little bit of 3 scattered questions if you took the time to tap into the show notes from last week. All right, so I promised you we would revisit empathy a little bit. I asked you to read pages 28, 29 from the Teaching Snowsports Manual, which focus on verbal communication, right? And I asked you to kind of think about how what we've discussed up until this point, how does that connect for you around the idea, one of our people skills fundamentals of recognize and influence the behaviors, motivations, and emotions of others. And then just to barely break open a conversation about some of the misunderstandings around people skills, right? So what I want to do first is, did anyone here have a chance to watch the video that I sent out 2 weeks ago from Brene Brown about the difference between empathy and sympathy? I see a couple of yeses. Does anyone want to? I see some large eyeballs too. Very good. It's okay. There's no expectation. Does someone want to just offer, let's say, 2 or 3 sentences about what they personally got out of it? Come on, hand up. It can be slow. Yes, Jeffra.
That was a great video. And for those of you that haven't watched it, it's short, it's sweet. It's kind of like Friday afternoons, which I really like. But it was, you know, it was really interesting to really dive in and compare empathy and sympathy. And the way that I thought that she did it, really, it resonated very well with me. And and it was cute.
Thanks, Jeffra. Awesome. All right, so one of the things I just want to pin right here is that we're constantly going to be coming back to this topic, right? So please know, rest assured, I want you all to go from a place of wherever you are right now to saying, ooh, I have lots of different ways I could explain this thing with or without using the word empathy. Because sometimes just that word alone can be really intimidating and feel overwhelming, as opposed to being a word that maybe just kind of encompasses maybe a toolbox full of things that you could use to influence someone else's experience differently, or maybe even change the way you experience your relationships with someone else. So I just want to keep increasing your familiarity with it, offer it to you in a handful of different ways, and invite you to kind of throw that filter on occasionally as we move through this content. All right? Excellent. So I promise you, we'll be back. Great. I'd like to move into our chapter on verbal communication, right? So if you had time to do the reading, fabulous. If you didn't, don't worry about it. Just stay here with us and we will go through it. So the first thing I'd like to do is I want to, one of the first things that popped out and I want to kind of put back to everyone here is, what does it mean to you to, in the book it says to take measure, or maybe to tuning into your student, or some other resources offer this idea of tuning into your student or your group. In some cases that may also be taking a judgment of someone else. So what does that mean to you? Maybe for me, that means I see my student and I notice something, all right? That's kind of the direction they're going with take measure. Good, I see some shaking heads. I see some large eyeballs. This is a good combo. Yes,
so,
you did.
For me, I think tuning into my students, the first thing is just listening to when they come to class, how they're feeling, watching their body language, trying to figure out, are they hungry? Are they there? Are they excited to be there? Are they cold? And just, are they talking? Are they not talking? Are they stepping back from the other kids? Or are they joining in with the other kids? I don't know. That's a start for me.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for sharing. Yes. Jimmy.
To me, tuning into them is looking at everything, not just when you're assessing, you're looking at one thing. Like I'm assessing if they can make this turn, or I'm assessing if they're hot or cold. Tuning in is looking them at everything, not just something specific.
Well, I like that. So can you say that part again? I want to make sure everyone hears it. You differentiated the difference between tuning into versus assessing. Will you give that to us again? I just want to make sure it has a chance to sink.
Yeah, so assessing is when you're looking at one thing. Like I want to assess, are my students cold, or can my students make a left-hand turn? Tuning in, I'm looking at the entire student and looking for anything, not just the things I'm thinking about, but anything that might be wrong, different, or otherwise need addressing.
Awesome, thank you. That was great, excellent. All right, so let's move on from there. All right, I'd love to see what are some examples of how verbal communication is used. So what we're looking for is like, think about when you're on the hill or you're within a group. I want to talk specifically about things like tone, you know, the emotion. How are you emoting? What do you see from the student? Inflection, volume, speaking pace, right? Give me a little bit of your personal experience or how this might apply to you as a receiver or a giver of delivering verbal communication. You got this. I see some smirks.
Well, one thing I'd like to say in general, in ski and snow instruction in general, one of the challenges is that the environment we work in is so complex that, you know, this idea of taking the time to tune in to our student is deep skill, because that means basically we have to be available to tune into them. So we have to be ready ourselves, and then we have to recognize that they're also in this very complex environment with us. So making that connection is sometimes hard.
Oh, I really appreciate hearing that. Like, and that's so true. This stuff is not easy. And it is really hard. And we have to also, we're asked to do this, but also to do this in adverse conditions. You know, we've got a fat face mask up, or we've got goggles over eyes, or we've got someone, you know, who, you know, a lot of these tells that we're looking for in more of our community experiences are unavailable to us, especially on initial onset. So I would love to just check the temperature here in the group. If I was out on the hill, how successful do you think I would be if I moved into my group and said, okay, group, today we're going to go ahead and use turns to go ahead and for speed control. Everyone's going to go one at a time. Maybe I'll see you at the bottom. And maybe tomorrow we'll do the same thing for 7 hours straight. Okay, 1. You go. 2, you go. All right, how's that gonna land? Good. All right.
Not gonna get me too excited.
Exactly. So a little reflection of like how our tone of voice and our intonation and the use of each individual word really carries our deeper meaning. So I have the ability to measure and to self-reflect and look at myself and say, okay, I see that my student might need a little boost, right? And so maybe coming to the relationship with a matched but measured slight tick up, right? And then on the flip side, maybe my student is a little too excited. So to be able to tick that down just a little bit and to calm down. It's very telling, especially when we're looking to develop these skills, if we have a peer show up and come to us and say, wow, I've never seen you be that calm. This is a personal thing that I receive sometimes, especially out on the hill, right? So to be that calm, and it's like, well, the truth is that I needed to calm myself down in order to support the experience of my group or student. So I'm appreciating some of the giggles around the screen of people who personally have experienced this. So be thinking about how you show up naturally and who you are. And then notice what is your natural range that is comfortable for you that you might be able to offer your student. And come back to some of these words that showed up for us on pages 28 and 29. All right, thinking about your speaking pace. We don't want to, we don't want to throw too many words at someone or speak too fast. We also want to be thoughtful about not speaking too slow, which then encourages sometimes people to finish our sentences or interrupt us, and that's frustrating. I don't encourage that. I do want to offer to you that the recommended from pitch coaches who guide entrepreneurs in front of venture capitalists, their recommendation is 120 words per minute. So if you can find a resource that gives you some of that feedback, happy to do a little research in the future if there's interest, that might be a great way to get an idea of how fast you happen to speak, right? Especially when you want people to be able to hear and ingest what you're saying. Excellent. Other things, again, as I mentioned earlier, tone, the inflection, volume. If I'm speaking really loud, it feels like an emergency all the time. All right. And of course, the emotion associated with it. Excellent.
I don't know about you guys.
Yes. Julianne.
I also get a lot of students where English is their second language.
Oh, good point. Yes.
So really having to adjust. It's a lot more of eye contact and communicating in different ways to make it solidify.
Absolutely. That's so important. Being clear, using language that's appropriate for your audience. Awesome. Thank you for adding that. I appreciate it. Awesome. Okay. So all of those examples, those are all tools that you can use when it comes to verbal communication, right? And it's also possible to misuse it. Like my example when I use my nice robot voice, right? To tell you that we're going to use, apply turn shape for speed control. Like that was going to be the most boring day on the hill ever. I already proved it, right? So keep those things in mind. Use your tools to your advantage. All right, excellent. All right, keep in mind, all right, think about, so I want to kind of drum up a conversation here about what it looks like to offer judgment-less conversation supporters, right? So think about this. Think about the person you have in your group who wants to answer maybe an open-ended question or answer whatever it is that you've thrown out to the group, right? And maybe they're right or wrong, right? So, but when I come back as the leader or the instructor and say, no, you're wrong, that person's probably going to be crushed, right? And most likely, they're not going to share again, right? And also keep in mind that when we do something, so maybe if we turn to someone else and say, hey, when we create connection through judgment of someone else, all we're doing is instilling a fear in that person we've created the connection with, that one day we're going to do that with someone else at their expense. So be thoughtful about how it is that you support people who are sharing things who may or may not be right? But our job as teachers is to guide them down this direction. So in the scope of verbal communication, let's offer up some things you can say. Right? My go-to is tell me more, right? If someone's coming to me and they're saying, hey, I've got, they're giving me an example of something or they're answering a question and it's just not quite getting there, I may ask them, just tell me a little more. Or ask them a specific question about part of that is correct. Tell me more about the ski. Tell me more about that great helmet you have. That's probably at least right. I can find something that's great about what they're doing if I work at it. Does anyone else have I have a few more that I'm happy to offer, but I'd like to hear from the group. What are some other things that you might say to help someone feel supported in response to an open-ended question? Yeah, Nancy.
Well, if you're in a group and it's something that you're working on, maybe, either ask if anyone else in the group has had the same sort of experiences, or, well, let's all try this again and see if we feel it that way as well.
Great.
And then maybe that person will change their thought, or maybe the more people will have that same feeling and you can change your thought as the instructor.
Totally. Nancy, what I love about this is that that's totally from the book. That's discovery.
Oh, I didn't read it.
No, well, not from the chapter we're in, so don't worry. So that's fabulous. That's great. Like, let people figure it out for themselves. That's awesome. That's a supported experience where then hopefully the foundation of trust is there so they can then go, oh, that's not actually what I feel, and come back. That's great. Thank you for sharing. Does anyone else want to add? Yeah, Brian.
So the whole idea behind an open-ended question is interesting to me, right? Like the whole, the idea, like the word itself, open-ended means that that you're not looking, you shouldn't be looking for a specific answer from your students.
Right.
And so passing judgment on an open-ended question seems like maybe if you were looking for the right answer from your students, perhaps an open-ended question is not the right tool for that.
Awesome.
And so being able to use an open-ended question is, like you said, discovery, but being able to pick the right tool for what you're trying to do.
Awesome. That's a really great reminder, Brian. I think in these contexts, like we, especially as leaders and as educators and instructors and whatnot, that as we move more and more towards really can we create a foundation where we're cultivating errorless learning? We talked about this last week with Linda, and how can we, and what I notice shows up sometimes in action and even in the conversations is sometimes, right, we do have to kind of bring people a little bit back towards maybe a direction. So thinking about let's stay really big, right, and say, tell me what you experience on your skis, and the person responds by telling you what a snowboard experience is. Right, so just bringing them back to the same baseline, but making sure that they feel like they're in a supported, trusted environment within those exchanges. So absolutely, I'm thinking top line, and a yes, I'm with you. Let's make sure that we're dropping the judgment in the back seat and giving it no voice, as we're supporting these learning environments. Great. So I'll toss out just a few that I jotted down, and if anyone else, if this stimulates some others. So another response I might offer is give that to me in another way, help me understand more. All right. Maybe it might look like, I like that. Right. Or hold on to that and let's try this. Right. So for me, that's the idea of saying, I like what you're doing. I'm asking you to do something different. Right? It's not saying what you're doing is wrong. I have to say, as a learner, this one's really important to me. Right? And then how does that look in your skiing or riding or in your lesson, and asking someone to provide an actual example? Oftentimes that can help connect different types of learners who maybe need to get out and try that a little bit more in a different way. All right. Anyone else want to add something to that? Yeah. Katie?
So I think one of the biggest things I have to think about is, and this leads a little bit into what Brian was saying, but what is my intention? And if it is the student progressing and learning, then that's not going to happen by me beating them with more information. So I have to set up things in a way that they can discover for themselves. And oftentimes that's through exploration, let's try this, versus this is how it should be done, or some other type of redirection. So it takes more patience for me.
I have a feeling that's probably a shared experience, is, upping the patience and really letting people talk things through. It's hard sometimes, but as I think, it seems to resurface quite a bit in these conversations is unless the person's kind of giving it back to you in their own words or really able to explain it, they're really not learning it. Especially on a deeper level where then hopefully they can offer it when we're speaking from trainers' perspectives, and then when we're speaking about our students, let them churn it, and support them. Awesome. Moving on, I want to let's see. I want to open up just a quick conversation. I am going to be following up in our show notes with a worksheet that will help kind of guide you to think about your understanding and possibly misunderstandings around people skills. Next week, Dave Lyon from the PSIA Alpine National Team is going to be joining us. He'll be our special guest. We are going to be diving into misunderstandings. I encourage you to fill out the worksheet, and if you want to, you can email it back to me, but you don't have to, or you could take 1 or 2 questions that showed up for you. This is your chance to get to ask someone who really probably has answers for you about maybe some of the fears that you might have, or some of the things that are showing up for you, maybe some things you're excited about. So this is a great chance for you to kind of turn that around. Also, a clarification that I've been asked several times about, people skills, as I've been told by the National Task Force, Katie, of course, redirect me if I'm incorrect here, is they will not be applied to exams until the 2021-22 season.
Yeah, not this upcoming season.
Yes, great. All right, everyone clear on that? I know I've gotten hands full of questions and concerns, and I think everyone's excited, and I'm stoked for the enthusiasm, but want to let everyone know that there's a chance to get familiar with this content, right? You're not expected to be able to turn around and apply it. Also, I want to announce that Anne Shorling will be joining us on June 12th. So mark your calendars for that. The week before, we're going to be focusing on identifying feelings with words. All right, so in preparation for her talk with us. All right, and anything else that anyone wants to add? We're not quite done, but I want to take care of our business before I always get kind of pushed up against it. Everyone is just so tuned. I'm so thankful for everyone. Excellent. All right, so what I would love to do is hear from a couple of people. So from what you read in the verbal communication, how is this part of how does this maybe influence your lesson? How does it influence the way you might lead a clinic? Give me a couple examples of maybe what you've done in the past, or how might this change what you would do in the future?
One thing I would say is that sometimes we think we're being empathetic or sensitive, but just like in every other kind of teaching, we have to check for understanding. And learning how to do that, I do feel like it's a skill that I need to work on. And again, it just requires so much self-awareness. That it's a never-ending learning process. So I'm glad it's being thought of now as a really important skill.
Awesome. Thank you, Ellen. Excellent. Does anyone else want to share their personal experience? Come on, this is how you learn. Hands are typed by their side. All right, great. Good. Then last item on my list for today is personal reflections on one of our fundamentals from the people skills. Again, I read that earlier in our meeting. Recognize and influence the behaviors, motivations, and emotions of others. How does that look for you? Or take the lens or the filter of what we've talked about today. How does that influence how you're hearing some of this content? What might it look like?
For me, it's serious.
Mm.
You think that you are, and I've never been a parent, but I certainly look back and think about how my parents influenced me on some of the things they said. And so I take it fairly seriously, and in some respects it's a little distressful. But I think when you're actually in the class and working with people, because you get out, you try your best to get out of your own baggage and into just being with them, I think we're able to pull on that and use it, and be able to apply some of those people skills. I think it comes pretty easily. And of course, I just, like I've said in the past, I teach tweens mostly, so.
That's a tough group. Thank you, Shannon.
I teach mostly beginners, so I have to constantly be reminding myself where they are in their space, so, that introductory of, what brings you to the mountain today? And I get a little bit of insight on, oh, my friend wants me to learn to ski, or, my husband wants me to learn, that kind of thing, where they're feeling the pressure already. Yeah. And keeping that in mind as, we're trying to engage them and teach them, and just kind of in the back of my mind have that going as to what might be some of their underlying concerns that are going to show up in things like fear and hesitation, and just kind of work with that.
Thanks, Jerry-Ann. That's awesome. That reminds me of kind of like one of my easy low-hanging fruit examples of like checking what the student's motivation is. And I always like the one of like, your student coming to you and they're like, all right, here's the next Olympian, on their first day. And you're just like, oh, crud. You just made my job so hard, as opposed to letting people show up exactly where they're at and having their own motivations. Amazing. Sounds good. I think that the more we start to tap in to each one of these people skills, I hope that what you'll start to see is like a lot of this is just, it has a lot to do with just being able to name feelings, me being able to name feelings as they come from you, and being able to manage those, and then understanding that those things come together and they help build trust-based relationships, which ultimately is like that long-term foundation. But these supporting components within those fundamentals that's the recipe, right? That's how we get there. Awesome. All right. Any questions before you head off on your 3 days of maybe something different or adventurous or not? Good. All right. Is everyone comfortable with where to find links to things in the show notes on the events page? Has everyone figured that out more or less? Yes. Yes, if you have. No, Jerry-Ann, you know how to email me if you haven't?
Yeah, I've just been going to the events page and the actual events. Should there be links on there?
Sometimes there is, not every week, but if I have a worksheet like I'll send out this week, then you can just go there, click it, download it, print it if that's your style.
Okay, I haven't gotten emails from you, so I'll shoot you an email after this to make sure you got my email right.
I don't send out weekly emails, so but I'm happy to communicate directly with you.
So I just found out about this on Facebook today, so I just kind of joined in, but is this part of I'm assuming it's part of an ongoing series?
Yes, awesome. Ellen, welcome. Thank you for spending time with us. Yes, so every Friday, 4:30 Pacific time, we are here and we are something of this nature. So discussion, special guests, we're digging into the people skills. And if you have questions for me, my email address is in the chat, or you can find it on the events page. I love hearing from you, and it helps guide my conversations. Awesome. Anyone else?
Ellen, the recordings are from every week too. So you can go check on, like last week was the 15th, I think. You'll see last week's information also.
Awesome. Yep. And if you have trouble, email me, I'll help you. Cool. All right. It's 5:01. Oh my gosh. All right. I'll see you all soon. Enjoy. I hope an adventurous weekend. Thanks for spending your time with me, and we'll talk soon. Bye.